Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome to another exciting show of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Hi, Nan.
Hi, Steve.
Well, we've got a great show for you. Did you ever see that film noir classic called Thieves Highway? Mm-hmm. It's such a gripping drama that takes on the dirty underbelly of the trucking industry.
Right.
And it stars the spectacular Richard Conte. And in this movie, Conte plays Nick Garcos. He's a world-weary, jaded World War II vet who returns home. Well, when he gets home, things aren't so great. He finds out that his family produce business has been run into the ground, and his father has been crippled by a rival produce worker.
Like a gang.
Like a gang.
Yeah.
And it really is. Back in those days, I think that it was almost like the mob ran these produce companies.
Right.
Well, so Conte, he decides to seek revenge against this crooked rival produce dealer and that caused his father's accident. And in this gripping portrayal, he shows his strength as an actor like no other. With his square shoulders, that cleft chin of his, those intense eyes, you sense that this man has seen some savagery on and off the battlefield.
Right.
As in most of his films, Conte gives the impression that he means business. And what I love most about him as an actor is that he is just as comfortable playing mobsters and street hoods as he is playing charming, sympathetic leading men.
Absolutely.
Like he did in Whirlpool, where he plays Gene Tierney's very sympathetic doctor husband.
Yes.
He always projected this manly strength, and you knew that he was nobody you wanted to mess with. So, say hello to our star of the month, Richard Conte.
Well, you had me with square shoulders, cleft chin, and intense eyes. That to me equals yummy.
Manly strength.
Well, he is an amazing actor. I love how you described him. And I'm so glad that once again, we may be introducing people to an actor that you've seen, but you might not know really the breadth of his career. And so we're going to dive right into that right now.
Absolutely.
Conte was born Nicholas Peter Conte to working class parents on March 24th, 1910. Now we just want to pause there for a second because some sources say 1910, some sources say 1915. We're just going to leave it there. You know, all actors like to be younger than they really are.
And I think studios often fudged people's birth years too, and so who knows where the truth lies.
Yes, but he was born in Jersey City, New Jersey. His father was a barber, his mother was a seamstress, and going by his first name at the time, Nicholas, he was a really hardworking guy, and he had a passion for acting pretty much right off the bat. He just didn't know how to get there and how to pursue his career, but he worked at his father's barber shop to earn money in high school. He worked as a truck driver, a floor walker, a stock boy, a Wall Street messenger, a clerk, a piano player, and a key job that he had was a singing waiter.
Wow.
I know, right?
Such a Renaissance man.
Yes. Which is kind of how he actually ended up getting discovered. In 1935, he's working at a resort in Connecticut, and these two guys walk in, Elia Kazan and John Garfield, and they discover him, and it changes the course of his life.
Oh, yeah, it did. You know, they really took a liking to him. They took him under their wing, and they really helped him seek a career in show business. Kazan helped secure a scholarship to the neighborhood Playhouse, which is, of course, the prestigious acting school on Manhattan's Upper East Side. And Conte also became an active member of the group theater, which Kazan and Garfield both belonged to. And this was that progressive theater company which embraced a lively, naturalistic acting style that was deeply influenced by the great Russian teacher Konstantin Stanislavski.
In researching his career, not only was he involved with the group, but the many people that came out of the group theater were some of the stalwarts of the acting teaching profession. I mean,
Yes.
Robert Lewis and Morris Karnofsky and so many others that really must have influenced his early beginnings as an actor.
Yeah. While a member of the group theater, Conte debuted on Broadway in 1939 in the limited-run production of My Heart's in the Highlands by William Saroyan.
Right, directed by Robert Lewis, who was one of the founders of the Actors Studio.
Yeah. The group theater, they actually produced this production, and it starred future successful film director Sidney Lumet.
Also in 39, he made his screen debut in Heaven with a Barbed Wire. Have you ever seen that?
No, I never have.
I haven't either.
Great title.
It's written by Dalton Trumbo and directed by actor-turned-director Ricardo Cortez.
It was also in that film that marked the screen debut of Glenn Ford, and it also starred Raymond Walburn, Marjorie Rambeau, and Jean Rogers, who'd made a name for herself portraying Flash Gordon's girlfriend opposite Buster Crabbe.
Now, you would think, film debut, you've been on Broadway, this is going to mean my career is going right to the top. But unfortunately, the film is not a success, and it sends Conte back to Broadway. And there are worse places that you can go.
Places to be. Exactly. Well, during the early 1940s, Conte gained extensive experience on stage. He appeared in the group theater's Night Music in 1940, which was written by group member Clifford Odets.
And can I just interject that was directed by Harold Clurman, and it featured Sanford Meisner. So do you hear all these acting and theater legends?
Legends.
He's surrounded by them.
And right after this, something really cool happened to Conte. He went on the road touring with Clifford Odets' boxing drama Golden Boy, which of course we all know the movie. It starred Barbara Stanwyck and William Holden, but this was the stage version that toured. It had been on Broadway previously with John Garfield and the tragic Frances Farmer.
Right.
Well, this was quite a feather in his cap as far as stage work goes.
Yes. His Broadway credits continue in 1941 with Heavenly Express, also with John Garfield, and Walk Into My Parlor. Now, neither of those shows were a hit, but he's clearly been building his resume on Broadway. And the next play that he stars in is called Jason, and he is playing the title role. And it features another tragic blonde, our wonderful Helen Walker that we've talked about on this podcast. And it's a big hit. It runs for 125 performances in 1942.
Yeah, things change when the war breaks out, and Richard Conte enthusiastically enlisted in the U.S. Army, but unfortunately, an eye problem caused him to be medically discharged. So he had to stay behind while all the other men went off to war,
right,
which was maybe a good thing for his career, but I'm sure not so much for his civic duty and what he wanted to do.
Yes.
He stayed home, he continued to appear on Broadway, and he married actress Ruth Story. They soon adopted a son, Mark, who would grow up to become a very respected film editor in his own right, and started his family around then.
And as has happened with other leading men during the World War II era that could not go to war for medical reasons, Hollywood needs their leading men. And so they lure him back to Hollywood, 20th Century Fox specifically. And there's a funny story. When Fox lures him back, they want him to change his name to Nicholas Conte, but not spelled the way he spells it. C-O-N-T-Y is how Fox wanted him to spell it. The real spelling of his name is C-O-N-T-E, but he compromised, changing his first name to Richard, saying that as long as he held on to Conte, C-O-N-T-E, his friends in Jersey City could never say that he'd gone Hollywood. Which I love that story.
Oh, that's such a great story. In 1943, he was cast alongside William Bendix, Lloyd Nolan, Anthony Quinn, and Preston Foster in this war drama called Guadalcanal Diary, which told the true story of the U.S. Marine battle that had occurred just 1 year earlier.
Wow.
The film received favorable reviews, and in fact, the New York Times wrote that the film was stirring and inspiring in many ways, and particularly praised the first part of the film as almost documentarily real.
Wow. Well, that success is enough to convince Conte and wife Ruth to relocate to California. And he soon becomes the go-to actor for war dramas, which there were so many of them being produced during that time period, of course. Purple Heart, 1944, with Dana Andrews and Farley Granger. Captain Eddie in 1945 with Fred McMurray and Lynn Barry. A Bell for Adana, we've talked about before, 1945 with Gene Tierney and John Hodiak, and A Walk in the Sun in 45, once again with Dana Andrews and featuring Lloyd Bridges and John Ireland.
Once the war ended, a certain cynicism swept through the land, which was reflected in Hollywood films. It was the rise of a new genre called film noir. It was born out of this, and Conte was the perfect actor to portray the likable but jaded guy who wanted to do the right thing but was often tempted by his past, always in danger of being engulfed in the rising criminal world.
He really is the perfect actor for film noir.
Oh, perfect. And his first film noir film was a great movie that I really loved called The Spider in 1945. And this was also the first film where he was billed as Richard Conte. And for the first time, he plays this cynical detective in New Orleans. Conte was a natural. This began his long reign as one of the best leading men in the genre.
One of his next films, Conte goes head-to-head with none other than James Cagney and completely holds his own. It's an espionage drama, 13 Rue Madeleine, 1947, directed by Henry Hathaway.
Yes.
Cagney plays an American World War II spy who trains new potential spies. He finds out that one of his trusted agents in training, played by none other than Richard Conte, is actually a double agent for the Nazis.
Oh, you dirty dog, Richard.
I know. Well, he's pretty amazing. I mean, he's able to find the nuances and the power within that kind of a role.
He followed this up with an Andre de Toth directed romantic drama called The Other Love. Very different from his previous movie. This was 1947. In this one, he plays a playboy race car driver who tempts a terminally ill concert pianist, played by Barbara Stanwyck, to come to Monte Carlo and drink and dance and smoke and gamble against the advice of her stuffy doctor, who was well played by David Niven, who she's really in love with. So soap opera.
It is. Now, I gotta say, because you know how much we both love Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, yeah.
Her playing the piano, I don't know how they faked that, but it looks completely like she is playing the piano. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, I love that. Well, this movie, it's pure soap opera, but Conte makes such a great caddish lover.
He does. He's so suave and so handsome, and you can't help but fall in love with him. He soon returns to film noirs in Call Northside 777, 1948, again directed by Henry Hathaway, where he plays a wrongly convicted prisoner helped by reporter James Stewart. And then in Cry of the City, 1948, this is a great one.
Yeah.
He plays a full-on villain as a cop killer chased down by his childhood friend, played by Victor Mature.
Yes.
Who's a police detective.
There's more compelling film noirs coming up for him. He follows this up with the Joe Mankiewicz directed House of Strangers.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, it's such a good film. He plays this released prisoner with some major daddy issues. I'm just going to say it.
Played by Edward G. Robinson.
Exactly. Who seeks revenge on his brothers who he feels stole the family business from him.
Yes, yes. His love interest was played by the always welcome Susan Hayward, and they have really amazing chemistry, and they'll go on to do another film together.
Hot chemistry.
Right, right.
Yeah, and you sense that both of these characters had seen some tough times, which I think made them connect. Mm-hmm. Perhaps best of all of these film noirs was the aforementioned Thieves Highway, which I started this podcast out with, 1949, where he seeks revenge on the mobster played by Lee J. Cobb, who caused his father to be maimed.
Right.
Great film, really, and I think an important film for the era.
Yeah, he moves away from the film noir genre with his next film, a Western comedy, interesting combo, called Big Jack in 1949. That's with Wallace Beery and Marjorie Main.
Yes, good supporting cast. And he plays a doctor who's, it's a little bit off-brand for him, but it's fun.
Yeah, he makes it work.
Yeah. He was more at home, I think, playing Gene Tierney's doctor husband in Whirlpool in 1950, which is a really great look into the psychological disintegration of a woman. Really well done, and he's great. The film was directed by Otto Preminger, and it's about a woman suffering from kleptomania who is hypnotized by this unscrupulous con man played by Jose Ferrer and used as a pawn in his murderous schemes. It was Conte's last film at Fox after fulfilling his contract.
So we're moving into the 1950s, and he signs a new contract, this time with Universal. But before we begin that part of his life and career, let's find out this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the question today, of course, it involves our guy, Richard Conte, and it's simple. What was the last production that he starred in?
All right.
And it's interesting because it's going to tie into one of his better-known films.
Wonderful. We'll be right back with the answer and more about Richard Conte after this.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood Tour. here's a wild story about 1944's Meet Me in St. Louis. For child actress Margaret O'Brien, who played the little sister of Judy Garland's character, competition was the key to crying real tears. As O'Brien said in an interview years ago, June Allison and I were in competition as the best criers on the MGM lot. We were called the town criers of MGM, so when I was having trouble crying, my mother came over to me and she said, "I'll have the makeup man put false tears down your face. But June is such a great actress, she always cries real tears." O'Brien went on to say, "That did the trick, and then I really started crying." And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we dive back into Richard Conte, we wanted to give a shout out to this week's Listener of the Week, Joel Sweetow. You are a mensch. We are so grateful for your support of this podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing it. And we just really appreciate you.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Joel. So returning to Richard Conte, it's now the 1950s, and Conte is appearing in more film noirs. His specialty, this included The Sleeping City in 1950 with Colleen Gray, Under the Gun 1951 with Audrey Totter, The Fighter 1952, a boxing drama with Lee J. Cobb, and one that I particularly love, The Blue Gardenia, which is an excellent film noir directed by Fritz Lang, where he plays this Playboy newspaper reporter who helps clear a woman, played by Ann Baxter, of murdering the lecherous Raymond Burr.
And he was always so lecherous in film.
Until he became Perry Mason.
Exactly, and then he was a good guy.
The greatest guy ever.
I love television.
I know it. And then in 1954, he stars in a movie that I just love this movie. Nobody's heard of it. It's called Highway Dragnet. And he is in fine form, playing this soldier who takes Joan Bennett and Wanda Hendricks hostage in an attempt to clear his name for killing a girl he befriends in a bar the night before, played beautifully by my girl, Mary Beth Hughes. And then also in 1954, he does The Big Combo, and he is chilling as this notorious killer, Mr. Brown, who clashes with an obsessed police sergeant played by Cornell Wilde. The film was also the final film of Helen Walker, who is superb as Brown's inconvenient wife.
I wonder if the character named Mr. Brown is what influenced Quentin Tarantino in his film Reservoir Dogs.
Oh,
because they had Mr. Brown and Mr. White.
That's right. That's right. I wonder if he maybe saw this movie.
Quentin, I'm sure you're out there listening. Let us know, would you?
We know he loved the old movies, so
right.
Possibly.
Well, in 55, he broke out of the B movies, as we call them, with a second lead in a pretty impressive film called I'll Cry Tomorrow, which is the glossy MGM biopic of alcoholic singer Lillian Roth based on her memoir. And he's reunited with Susan Hayward, who has a field day as Roth.
And also in 1955, he appeared in two more now iconic film noirs. There's New York Confidential with Broderick Crawford and Anne Bancroft, and The Big Tip-Off with Constance Smith and Bruce Bennett. Around this time, also, he moved over to Columbia Studios, and he made a rare pit stop in this domestic comedy with Judy Holliday, of all people.
How fun.
I know, called Full of Life in 1956. But after that, he returned to his roots in film noir in this gripping tale called The Brothers Rico in 1957, which also starred Diane Foster. Conte then took on supporting roles in movies like The Angry Age in 1957, which was a drama starring Anthony Perkins and Silvana Mangano based on the novel The Seawall. He was also in the movie They Came to Cordova in 1959, which was a Western with Gary Cooper and Rita Hayworth.
So by the end of the 50s, the film noir genre is beginning to fall out of fashion. And because Conte is so known for film noirs, his star begins to wane with it. He did take a supporting role in the original Ocean's 11 in 1960 with that ensemble cast that was the 5 members of the Rat Pack: Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. And I can so see, off screen.
Yes.
Clearly on screen, Conte fits right into that group.
He fits right in.
Wouldn't you just love to be a fly on the wall when those guys would go out after they were done shooting?
Oh, totally. Conte, they kind of welcomed him into the group as sort of an honorary member of the Rat Pack, which was very cool.
Unfortunately, his marriage to Ruth Story is ending, and after 20 years together, they divorce in 1963.
Around this time in his career, leading roles are becoming fewer and fewer, so Conte, being proactive, he forms his own indie theatrical and television production company called Pine Brook Productions in January of 1960, which is very cool, but I couldn't find through my research any evidence that he actually ever produced anything.
Yeah.
But still, he's got the right idea. Create your own content.
Right. And he's also beginning to appear regularly on television, which is what a lot of folks did in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, he appeared in some really cool TV shows around this time. He's in Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He's in The Untouchables with Robert Stack. And he even does an episode of 77 Sunset Strip.
Well, he also has some interesting titles in the 60s in terms of film. Who's Been Sleeping in My Bed, 1963, starring Dean Martin and Elizabeth Montgomery. This next one, Circus World, 1964, a circus-themed Western starring John Wayne and Rita Hayworth, as well as the biblical epic, The Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965, starring Max von Sydow, Charlton Heston, and Dorothy McGuire.
The majority of the films in which Conte appeared in the 1960s were kind of subpar. However, he did get a career boost when his old pal Frank Sinatra gave him the meaty and memorable role of Lieutenant Dave Santini in Tony Rome, 1967, which was the crime drama where Sinatra plays a rogue Miami cop, and its sequel, The Lady in Cement, 1968.
He also has a memorable role as an unscrupulous hotel detective in The Star-Studded Hotel, 1967, with Rod Taylor, Carl Malden, Melvin Douglas, and Merle Oberon.
Yes, and a little sidebar, Hotel was later made into a TV show in the 1980s. In an upcoming episode, we're going to do a whole episode about classic films turned into TV series.
Yes, yes. Now, in 1968, Conte ventures behind the camera, stars in and directs Operation Cross Eagle, a cheapy war drama with Rory Calhoun. And it was his one and only time as a director. If he had lived a longer life, I suspect he would have been behind the camera even more.
I know, he seems like a natural to turn to director.
He does.
Well, Conte experienced an incredible comeback in 1972, and it was huge. He was cast in Francis Ford Coppola's mob masterpiece, The Godfather. He plays Don Barzini, the mortal enemy of Marlon Brando's mob boss, Don Corleone.
You know, when this film was originally slated to begin production, Conte was considered for the lead of Don Corleone. But after Mario Puzo's novel became a best-selling phenomenon, then the movie became a big budget studio affair, and Brando took on the Don Corleone role, which unfortunately meant that Conte went to the supporting role.
Capitalizing on this renewed interest in his career, Conte spent the 1970s making mobster movies in Italy. The films were cheaply made with titles that probably said everything you needed to know. Shoot First, Die Later, 1974.
Okay.
Evil Eye, 1975. And Violent Rome, 1975 also.
Okay.
But on the personal front around this time too, Conte found love again. He married actress Shirley Colleen Garner in 1973.
That's wonderful. Do you think that Don Barzini is his most famous role? Do you think in terms of what people know of him now?
I think if anybody knows Richard Conte today, it's probably for The Godfather.
And that scene around the table when all the mobsters are there, he is just absolutely riveting. You can't take your eyes off him.
He holds court. Yeah,
he really does hold court. On April 3rd, 1975, Conte suffered a massive heart attack and a stroke. Now, there are disputes as to the year he was born. We mentioned at the top of the podcast. Some say March 24th, 1910. The New York Times says he was born in 1916. So he's either, we think he probably was 65 when he passed away.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he died 12 days after the heart attack, ending an amazing actor's life.
His funeral was held at Westwood Memorial Park Chapel of the Palms. Fred Astaire was a pallbearer, and the great actor Norman Lloyd gave the eulogy. What a legacy this man left behind. In my opinion, he ranked right up there with Humphrey Bogart, Robert Ryan, Sterling Hayden, Robert Mitchum, and Dana Andrews as one of the very best film noir actors we've ever seen.
Well said. He was in over 100 films. So, Steve, if you can you narrow down 3 movies for us to watch if you don't know about Richard Conte, or even if you do?
Well, I definitely would have to say Thieves Highway.
Yeah.
I think it's just him at his best.
Here he is with Lee J. Cobb.
Sit down.
I ain't staying long. $3,900.
I like you. Hey, Let's say you just roll into town with a truckload of apples, you know? All Atlanta. Now, what do you think would have been a fair price?
$6.50 a box.
6.5 is what I got. I'm talking about your end.
Your end of nothing is nothing.
A tough kid, huh? Okay. Okay, we'll split 3 1/4 for you.
$6.50 for me.
Listen, you cheap peddler, I was in this business when you were still sucking a bottle. Probably got that load for $1.50 a box. I'm giving you more money than you ever seen in your life. When did you ever make more than a day's pay?
You're getting red in the face, Mr. Figlia.
Terrible way I lose my temper, huh? I like you.
I don't like you. $3,900.
Hey, you sound like a busted record.
Look, Mr. Figlia, you don't know me, but I know you. You tried to take me.
Who said I tried to take you? Who said it?
Never mind.
Another one, I think The Godfather.
Yeah.
I think I would be remiss not to include that.
Here he is in The Godfather.
Times have changed. It's not like the old days, where we can do anything we want. A refusal is not the act of a friend. If Don Corleone had all the judges and the politicians in New York, then he must share them. All he loved is use them. He must let us draw the water from the well. Certainly he can present a bill for such services. After all, we are not communists.
The third one, I'm so torn because there's so many that I love of him, but I'm going to say Call Northside 777.
Oh, really?
It's a great performance, and he's a wrongly accused man, and he plays it so beautifully. You really get to see the tough, yet the tender all in one performance.
And here he is with Jimmy Stewart.
My mother is doing this for me, not to sell your papers.
Oh, now, wait a minute.
I made my wife divorce me, so my boy has a new name. Now you put his picture in the paper. You spoiled everything for him.
I don't know. I thought I was doing a good job.
No. This is writing without heart, without truth. Before I thought maybe some crook lawyer would try to get the $5,000 from my mother. But this I never figured. Yes, I say it. I'll stay here. I'll stay here 1,000 years. Never write any more about my family. Leave them alone. Leave alone my wife and my boy.
Many of the titles that we spoke about today, you can actually find free on YouTube or other streaming services. So at the end of our show notes, when you're listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube, Steve will list some films and check them out.
Yeah.
All right, it's time for the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Well, and the question was, what was the last credit of Richard Conte in his career? And it's a little bit of a trick question.
Okay.
Because it was in this TV miniseries called The Godfather Saga in 1977. And it's a little bit cheating here because what they did, they went in and they re-edited together in chronological order segments from The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2.
Right.
And they also added additional footage to it. And they called it a miniseries. And they were just double dipping, trying to make more money off of this.
Well, I hope Richard Conte's estate got some money out of that.
I know, but that was his final film performance.
Well, I love that we're able to highlight these folks that some people might not know, these actors.
Yeah, and he's a really great actor to get to know.
Thanks, everybody, for spending this time with us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review and follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood We're on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, you can always email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.
so many times. I could recite lines.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist.